after weeks of outrage following 2 deadly ICE shootings in Minneapolis, and after weeks of deflecting and victim blaming by the White House, here's what President Trump is now saying about the killings of Renée Good and Alex Pretti.
I'm not happy with the 2 incidents. It's not, it's both of them, not one or the other. He was not an angel, and she was not an angel.
You mentioned Renée Good and Alex Pretti not being angels. Do you think any of that justified what happened to them, though?
No, I don't. It should have not happened. It was a very sad, to me, it was a very sad incident, 2 incidents.
Now, those comments by Trump come as we are seeing a change in the streets of Minnesota. Today, border czar Tom Homan initiated his drawdown plan by pulling 700 federal agents out of the state. About 2,000 will still remain on the ground in Minneapolis. In the meantime, Trump's vice president is refusing to back down on claims that he amplified about one of the victims.
Did you plan to apologize to the family of Alex Pretti?
For what?
For, labeling him an assassin with ill intent.
Well, again, I just described to you what I said about Alex Pretti, which is that he's a guy who showed up with ill intent to an ICE protest.
No, but if it's determined that his civil rights were violated by this FBI investigation, will you apologize to that?
So if this hypothetical leads to that hypothetical leads to another hypothetical,
it's a real case,
will I do a thing? And again, like I said, we're going to let the investigation determine. We're going to let the actual law come to the surface and figure out what happened.
He's saying both things at the same time. He's standing by calling Alex Pretti an assassin and also saying somehow that the investigation is going to just continue. A lot of people would listen to that and say he's already drawn his own conclusion.
Yeah, he actually said he was an assassin hours after the incident happened. He didn't wait for any investigation. He didn't wait for any understanding. He just basically put that out there. And the fact that you have Donald Trump saying that this was terrible that these died, that he's willing to say that it was wrong that they died, and you have his vice president saying, no, I'm standing by calling Alex Pretti, a man who was shot 10 times, many times in the back. It's been labeled a homicide. He's willing to not retrench anything he said. I just think that's frankly inhuman.
Why won't he back down on that when all the other officials have?
Well, I don't know. Maybe he's waiting to see how it all turns out, and maybe he believes Pretti, shouldn't have been there. Maybe he believes Pretti, did engage in activity that he should have been engaging in.
That he was planning on an assassination?
Yeah, look, I don't know.
He called him an assassin.
But I also think that what he said is true. We should see what the results of the investigation are, and I also think what President Trump said is true.
Should he have?
These things should not have happened.
Should he have taken that back? He described him as a would-be assassin. Everyone makes mistakes. The vice president could acknowledge he made a mistake. Why didn't he? Should he?
That's up to him. I don't know. He made the comments that he made. He's standing by them today. The president also made the comments that he made. And look, I know it's a little rudimentary, but the president's word is what matters in the White House. The president doesn't want the shootings to have happened. And the president says he wants them investigated, and he doesn't want to see these kinds of things happening in the streets. And so,
okay. So first of all, it wasn't just J.D. Vance, right? It was many in this administration. It was Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
It was
really
Kristi Noem calling him a domestic terrorist and calling Renée Good a domestic terrorist when their bodies were still warm, when there were no facts known. It's irresponsible, it's indecent, it's cruel to the family, but this administration believes that apologizing makes you weak, makes you look weak, and it's the wrong thing to do. And so I just think that we've become accustomed to the Trump administration not apologizing or not taking things back under any circumstance. And this is the least shocking thing that's happened today.
I think it's a case of, yes, generally the Trumpian way of doing things is to not back down, not apologize.
To double down.
At the same time, they're withdrawing 700 officials from Minneapolis, and this is also what Trump has said about that drawdown and about the broader strategy in Minnesota.
That big change on immigration, 700 officers leaving Minneapolis. Did that come from you?
Yes, it did. But it didn't come from me because I just wanted to do it. We are waiting for them to release prisoners, give us the murderers that they're holding, and all of the bad people, drug dealers, all of the bad people. I learned that maybe we can use a little bit of a softer touch, but you still have to be tough. These are criminals. We're dealing with really hard criminals.
So, I mean, look, in a way, Trump is backing down there. And I know that a lot of liberals may not want to give him a way out, but they sought a way out of this, and they took it. And that's, I think, what we're seeing.
Well, you don't get a way out after two people are murdered in the street. And let's actually go through the natural progression. On December 31st, nobody's mentioned the name Keith Porter, who was murdered by an off-duty ICE agent on December 31st after firing shots into the air in Los Angeles, California. And then you get to Renée Good, and then you get to Alex Pretti, and you have a straight white male who's a gun owner who's gunned down in the street, shot 10 times for our eyes to see, and then the tides change. What you saw from J.D. Vance was being an a-hole. And that's emblematic of the White House. But even more importantly, it's something that shows a bit of naivete from the vice president in that he's not reading the same tea leaf that even Donald Trump is reading. The majority of white male evangelicals are fleeing away from this, ICE in the middle of the streets, taking women and children out, shooting white people in the middle of the streets. It is really causing a distress amongst just common sense Republicans. That is what we are seeing. And Donald Trump in this particular moment is not on the same page as J.D. Vance. The last thing is, and this is what frustrates me about people saying that all of a sudden Donald Trump's taking a softer tone or whatever it may be. The facts are this. Only 5% of the people that they have deported thus far are violent criminal offenders. 73% of the individuals have no criminal record. You can shake your head. It's from the Cato Institute.
It's false. It's false.
The Cato Institute is false?
The federal government, the Department of Homeland Security, has repeatedly published data showing that 70% of the people that have been deported had other criminal records. They have said this on the record time and again. I don't know about the Cato Institute, but the government has repeatedly said this.
I feel like I can trust Cato over the government.
Hold on a minute. Here's the thing, though. The thing is that you take whatever the DHS says as truth, as the Bible.
They published the list.
Okay, yes, but that doesn't mean anything, Scott. These are the same people who told us that the people they had sent to that hellhole in El Salvador were the worst and the worst. They were gang members. And when independent journalists found out their names, which they did not release, and went through the records and the names, most of the people that were sent to El Salvador were not Tren de Aragua, were not gang members, and did not have violent records. These are the same people who lie constantly. These are the same people who said that a Cuban man who just died in ICE detention committed suicide when the medical examiner in Texas ruled it a homicide. Right. They lie time and time again. And you come here and you repeat the lies.
Just today, 4,000 people, they put out the list, in Minnesota have been taken off the streets. Criminals, violent, rapists, murderers, pedophiles, people who've done very, very bad things. They're not backing down here.
5-year-old,
They've already taken
7-year-old
people
U.S.
that need to
citizens.
go away.
There's 3,800 children under detention.
I'm going to let Brianna have a word, but I just wanted to make a note about the lists that they've been releasing out of Minneapolis and Minnesota. Some of those are people that were detained long ago. Some of them are people who were transferred directly into ICE custody, which is something that the administration claims doesn't happen, but it actually does. So it's a mixed list of people who are being detained, yes, but not all of them have been detained in this extraordinary surge that has caused all of this upheaval in Minnesota.
I wanted to go back to something you said, Bakari. It seems that the topic of this conversation right now is whether J.D. Vance should have apologized or taken back labeling Pretti as an assassin because, some say that he jumped to conclusions. You just accused ICE agents and Border Patrol of murder. Aren't you going to say, why don't we wait for the investigation? Don't you want to also wait for the investigation instead of prematurely?
Homicide.
A homicide doesn't mean murder. Homicide includes two people who are involved in a killing.
I know you know the difference. I know you know the difference.
There's a requirement.
I'm trying to confuse everybody.
What's that mean? Let me let
It's 10 people.
What does homicide mean?
Yeah, well,
murder
actually requires a malice aforethought. And so, yes, I'm not going to back. I'm not going to back.
You asked me a question.
You asked me a question. I'm going to answer it. And so, no, I'm not going to back away from the fact that what I saw with my own eyes were two people who were murdered in the street. The reason I say that is based upon my lived experience. The reason I say that is because I'm in courtrooms around the country, and I actually deal with people like the families of Renee Good, like the families of Alex Pretti, like the families of Keith Porter. And one of the things that I can tell you is when an officer comes up, and even if you are a lawful gun owner, and an officer, if you get into a scrummage with an officer, many times if they shoot you, that is a murder. You know why? Because in this country, in the United States of America, resisting arrest, you know what? That's not a death penalty crime.
No, trying to run someone over with your car is a crime.
Right, but that's not even.
That's what Renee Good did.
Alex Pretti?
No, it isn't.
All right.
Renee Good did try to run
one of the other.
Yes, she did. She accelerated. I mean, Ellie Honig has been on this show and also said that he says it's very clear that it looked like she was doing that. So there are people on both sides of the aisle who have objectively said, look,
it's not a both sides issue. It's not a both sides issue.
Well, you're calling it a murder, so it is actually a both sides issue when you're preemptively jumping to conclusions that these agents murdered someone. When, for example, in the Renee Good case, there's a lot of dispute.
Can I just ask you a basic humanity question? Then?
Sure.
I mean, just we can get to the. We don't have to talk legalese in front of all the people watching the show tonight. Do you believe Renee Good and Alex Pretti should be alive today?
Of course. I wish they didn't put themselves in this position.
No. It was a yes or no question.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course.
I mean,
I wish they didn't put themselves in this position.
It's not a caveat.
It's so interesting how
That's your
you
First
are
Amendment.
much harsher than
You
Donald
run someone
Trump.
over with their car?
You should not.
That's not a First Amendment right.
First of all, he put him. There is a such thing as officers who actually put themselves in the line of danger. Jeff Alpert, who is an expert on criminal justice, actually had a quote in the New York Times that said he put himself in the realm of danger. If you look frame by frame, she didn't try to hit him. But look, she should be alive today. That officer was more than reckless. I believe that
she was reckless by trying to accelerate her car into a human.
Could I just point out that Donald Trump himself says he's actually in a very different position than you. Today, he said they shouldn't have been killed. Basically, that's what he said.
They should be alive.
He did not say they shouldn't have been there. He said this shouldn't have happened. And the fact that you can't say those basic things, it shouldn't have happened.
I just said that it shouldn't have happened,
yes,
but they
were
put themselves in that
blaming
position.
And Donald Trump did not blame them. He
What did
basically
Keith
said
Porter do?
ICE officials shouldn't have done this. And you're saying that they were responsible.
What did Keith Porter do? What did Alex Pretti do?
10
What did they
bullets
do?
in his
No,
back,
let's not
and
back
he's
off of it.
responsible.
Let's not back off of it.
Sure,
what did they do to say that today is the day that I'm going to die? What did Aaliyah Rahman do? Instead of just going to her appointment, are you familiar with Aaliyah Rahman? No. She testified today. She is the person who is disabled, who ICE actually took a knife and cut her seatbelt and drug her out of her car. Like, there is a level of humanity that I think you're missing when I ask you a yes or no question, and your answer is yes, but. The but negates everything forward and everything behind it.
No, it doesn't.
That's actually what but does.
No, but in this
Like
instance,
absolutely.
That's literally what but does.
English is my second language, and even I know that.
But would you advise someone, even if they're very angry, even if they don't like the laws, to insert themselves into the middle of an active law enforcement situation?
If they see something wrong, absolutely.
You would advise a person or a client of yours to literally engage in the middle of an active law enforcement matter?
If they see something wrong, I would say yes. I would say definitely
That's a crime.
I would say put your.
Alex Pretti was filming with a phone.
You're advising people to commit crimes.
What I'm advising
Do you
people, just to
consider
be
filming with a
Hold on a
phone?
second. Hold on.
Just to be-
Guys,
just
just one at a
holding a
time.
camera
One
does
at a
not
time.
absolve you from the law.
Just to be extremely clear, because I know how these things get clipped and shipped around on Twitter. What I'm actually telling you, Scott, is if my client came to me and said, Bakari, I was outside and I saw something going down and I saw somebody being abused and I went and tried to put myself in between them, or I raised the camera, do not hit officers. Do not spit on officers. But yes, by all means, if you see something wrong, videotape it. I mean, I can't sit here. My dad was a member of SNCC, right? He was a professional disruptor.
Holding a camera,
Like, what do you want me to
holding a
say?
camera is different than inserting yourself or inserting your
let me
vehicle
ask
into
you-
the
I
middle
mean, well, hold
of a
on.
law
I mean, I think,
enforcement.
but
was walking
Scott,
backwards.
what was Alex Pretti doing in the moment that he was assaulted
What
by
was Keith Porter
ICE
doing?
officers?
He was engaging
What was he
with law
doing?
enforcement
He wasn't.
officers.
He was looking backwards. He was
within
protecting
inches of
our
them.
No, he wasn't.
Yes, he
Law
yes, he
enforcement
was. There was
What
a
was he?
scrum.
Hold on.
Abby.
What was he doing? What exactly was he
He was
doing?
engaging in the middle
Do you
of a law
remember that he
enforcement
was
situation.
recording?
That doesn't
And
absolve
do you
you.
hold on? No,
That
no,
doesn't
no.
absolve you of
No,
anything.
I'm
Holding a
talking.
camera and a phone does
Hold
not
on a
erase
second. I'm
federal
talking
laws.
frame by frame. He stepped to help the woman who was on the ground. He stood up. They pepper sprayed him. He put his hands up because he had just been pepper sprayed, and then they tackled him.
Can I ask a better
So what did
question?
he do?
No. Can I ask just one
How
question?
did he
of you, Scott?
insert himself?
You asked a great question. I mean, let me ask you a question. All of those things that you said are a crime. Which one of those things that you enumerated is a death penalty crime punished by death?
Well,
That can require you to be gunned down in the street. Which one of those things?
nothing requires you to be gunned down in the street, Bakari. My only point is that you have ordinary people who are being trained or instructed to go into the middle of active law enforcement zones, and that is extremely unwise.
You keep saying that with zero evidence.
You
keep wanting to paint them as trained agitators.
They really are. And I know you don't believe it, but they are absolutely
I think there's plenty of people in this country who are willing to be outraged and protest against Donald Trump.
If you insert your body and yourself into the middle of a law enforcement situation,
filming an
it's
abuse
dangerous.
is not inserting
All right, we really have to go, guys. We are way past our time here. We do have to move on.
The left of both of these guys today. That's what's interesting.
All right, we'll leave it there. Next for us, as Donald Trump threatens to nationalize elections, Steve Bannon is calling on ICE to surround the polls during the midterms, something the Democrats have been warning about. Plus, the president tonight says that he doesn't know why Tulsi Gabbard went to the FBI raid at an election office, even though he directly ordered her to do that. We'll discuss.